Start. Cute. Okay.
We were active in conversation. Awesome. You guys asked some interesting questions about like different types of AI or different categories. Did you start this?
That's a no.
That's
good.
A lot of humanness,
Good.
a lot of personal.
Yeah, I say, hey, again,
Hey,
AI, no place
would
here.
do-
Okay.
Okay, let's start over.
Yeah.
You guys brought up some interesting points about the different types of AI or different categories of like technologies we might categorize as AI. So like generative AI is usually what we think of as ChatGPT or like all these other language models that you could talk to and then it like generates a new piece of text. And then we have like predictive or like classifier AI, which is more like in your maps on your phone. Like it gives you suggestions of where you might want to go or like your social media algorithm or something like that. I guess like I'm interested to know, can any of you give us a little thought on like when AI like thinks, what's happening? There's no right or wrong answer.
Or do we not know?
Yeah,
That
it's
also
okay
is
if you
an
don't know,
option.
and that's a good option too.
I personally have no idea.
Well, so kind of, this is gonna relate back a little bit to what we were just talking about in terms of like the means to an end versus the end itself, this kind of like teleological view of AI. Because what an AI is that it's an algorithm. And algorithms are, well, if you break a machine down, it's going to be a bunch of zeros and ones, yes or no. And so AI, I don't know, when I view how AI is thinking, it is a little bit teleological. There is an end result that will be deemed the most correct out of all of the ones that you can make. And the reason that I'm kind of like relating this back to this whole, the means to an end versus the end itself, I feel like kind of how we're classifying like when AI is doing it for us versus when we're using AI to help do something is when we categorize AI's distinction of right, when it reaches that, when the algorithm reaches that point where it deems it the most correct, whether we deem that as the final solution
Yeah.
or we use that as a step of the process. I'm kind of noticing this like separation.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can even, like we were talking a little bit about how we do use it for these minor tasks. And I'm wondering how that might change the way that we think. The ability to do that, the ability to sort of like write off the things that we don't want to do. In my view, mostly we do this because we find some things boring, right? And we are not animals that like to be bored, especially not in our generation when we have so much access to so much stimulation all the time. And so I wonder how AI and our use of AI, even in these even in like a tool-based way, might change the way that we think about our time, the way that we think about what is worth it for us to do. Kind of going back to what you, Eva, were saying, of like, what do we sort of give up on more quickly than we might have 10 years ago or something. Do you guys relate to that at all, or do you have thoughts on how you find it sort of changing the way that you think or engage with your work?
Yeah, I've really been thinking about this a lot because I think a very common argument against, or like for AI is, well, like we're all using it in some way or another. Like I open Instagram and it is technically a form of artificial intelligence at play, and I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem with ChatGPT. I think what that's revealed to me is actually I also do have a problem with Instagram. I have a problem with all of these intelligence frameworks being used in my life because it's taking so much from me in the sense that like, I don't know, I think it's okay to be like, well, I don't want to do this busy work and so I'm not going to do it, I'm going to let something else automate it for me. I think the problem is that it's a slippery slope. And it's not going to necessarily happen to everyone. It's very easy to start giving up like the most mundane and the most like pointless tasks to AI And then if you do that, like if you stop taking notes for a meeting, then why are you even listening to the meeting? Why are you even at the meeting actually? And why are you at your job? To me, it just seems like it's very easy to get into that wormhole. And I think part of the problem as well is that LLMs like ChatGPT are all purpose. They can do anything. And so once you start using it for, as you said, that I really like that language of like as a step in the process, but it's also there to be the process for you. And it's very open to it. And like you said, mentioning thinking, like it says that it's thinking, but that's not really, like that's not the same
Yeah.
process, but we're so comfortable with characterizing that as such.
Exactly.
And that's really like my main concern. It's not so much about AI itself, it's about how we treat it and about how we talk about it and how we are starting to push aside like what makes us human. Like being bored is a fundamental part of the human experience. And if we're not gonna be bored, then what are we gonna do? Like what else is there? It's constant simulation. That's the most inhuman thing I can ever think of. So it is something that just like I don't know the implications of giving up things to AI. I think when it's thought maybe in a very ungracious and like not giving a lot of not very good faith way, but I think that there is certainly something to that.
You bring up a couple really interesting things that are like being very actively researched in like the computer science and AI community. The first one is anthropomorphism, and like I feel like a good way we might see this come up in our lives is people referring to ChatGPT as like, oh, I'm gonna ask Chat, like that's my friend Chat. Like I think I'm sure you guys have heard all the news stories about people like having an AI boyfriend or like using AI as their therapist or naming their AI or forcing their AI to call them a certain name or treat them a certain way. Like I think there's like the friend AI example, like there's this very frightening like replacement of a human presence with a computational presence that I think is really disturbing. But so yeah, I'm glad you brought up this like idea of us treating an AI as like another person. The second one was I think about just like reliance on AI and like using it out of convenience. I think that's really worrisome because like there's, as we've all kind of agreed upon, there's really hard boundaries over like when is like something, like how do we prevent ourselves from going down this general purpose rabbit hole? Especially considering all these like concerns about AGI and like super intelligence is gonna take over the world, which like I personally don't believe in that because I think a system that can do everything is inherently untestable and like unstable. But I guess like I think using AI out of convenience is really like hurting our relationships, and similarly this like anthropomorphic feel to it is really interrupting like how we interact with other people. I think that could lead us nicely into like how is AI, if it is, like affecting your like connections with other people, whether in school, whether with your friends. What are your thoughts on that?
You brought up a really good point before about people using AI as a therapist. I've heard like a bunch of like threads and stuff about how people, I don't know, I guess just kind of like out of curiosity utilize like AI programs to kind of like help them through their issues and stuff. And a lot of people say like, oh, it works, it's great. But like at the same time, like one of the main purposes of going to therapy is to talk to someone about your issues one-on-one. And so by communicating with an AI, which is basically like, you know, it tells you what you want to hear, unless you like write it down like, oh, like be blunt, be brutal, be honest or something. And even then it's like also telling you like, oh, you're instructing it to do it. So like it's not authentic, it's not genuine. And so feeding an AI like these like real like world like issues like traumas and stuff and trying to like find some kind of like way to cope or like some kind of like solution. And AI is not gonna like know, it's gonna have like some basic like surface level answers because it's like, it's a machine, it's not human. And that will like, yeah, and it will kind of like just influence that individual and just kind of like, you know, not help them. I remember just reading a story about some young guy who was like going through like some serious shit, and like he was consulting an AI as a therapist, and he ended up killing himself.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is like seriously dangerous for like, you know, young people who are like, you know, going through it and are just like vulnerable, and they feel isolated from others and feel like they can't like share like what they want to share with like, you know, family members or like, you know, friends or actual human therapists, and they rely on AI like ChatGPT, and there's one called Claude, it's like really powerful too. And it's like, you know, it's been updated in a way it's like, it sounds so much like a
Yeah.
human, and it's so in-depth and so precise, but it's not human. It's like so close to it, but like it's not. And like eventually it'll get to a point where like you can't even differentiate the two. And like that's gonna be like extremely detrimental to like mental health as a whole
Yeah.
for like the next generation, even especially now.
I mean, I think what that makes me think of, and even the whole cost-cutting line of thought that we were sort of going on earlier, is that it seems like AI has really this ability to highlight existing inequities and inequalities in our society. Because I have to imagine that somebody who turns to AI for therapy is not someone who has maybe the immediate exposure and immediate access to in-person therapy. And even, you know, as that becomes the case, hopefully you have more conversations about who is going to be vulnerable to this kind of sort of algorithm or program. And so I wonder if that also, I also read that story about that boy, and I think that there is another sort of conversation to be had ethically about the relation of AI to capital and to saving money versus spending money. And where, you know, it has been known for a very long time, unfortunately, especially in the context of incredible tragedies, that where there are bodies, there is cost, right? So if you can cut out people, then you can save money. And that has never been a positive thing, ultimately. And so I wonder if we can also see this through that lens, through the lens of a sort of institutional power that is trying to insert itself. Maybe that's even itself a problem, the idea of itself inserting itself, as opposed to people using it to.
You mean like AI inserting itself, or
Yeah.
CEOs like Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg forcing AI?
Shout out.
upon yeah. Well, I feel like one example I can think of, like recently, is like LinkedIn is changing its AI policy, so it automatically opts you into using your posts to
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
train their chatbot. So you can turn it off though. I turn mine off. I think like it's it's heavy, and it's a kind of a pernicious topic to bring up, like the kind of power dynamics at play here. But I don't know. I'm trying to phrase it into a question, or I don't know. What are people's feelings on like AI as a like tool for the rich to get richer, for example?
Hate that.
Thumbs down.
That's kind of bad.
I think Erin made me start thinking about Marx
Mm-hmm.
and what
I have that
Marx would
effect on
say
people.
about
Yeah.
about the rise of AI. And I think he would really hate it because it is just going to further exacerbate, you know, wealth inequality. There's sort of a very definite split between the population that is trying to catch up desperately with AI and trying to not get their careers replaced by AI. And then there's the population that wants to harness AI to increase efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And so that population already owns a lot of capital and has a background of wealth, and that's the population that has the means to automate everything and to just erase human presence because they're the only presence that matters to them. So
I think from like a Marxist view, it's very alarming, and it makes me a lot more adverse to the presence of AI in my daily life.
Mm.
I think that usage of the word efficiency combined with something Anna said earlier about mundanity, I think that there's this like subtle moralization that's going on behind how we justify AI usage. If we can declare something inefficient or boring or mundane, something that we don't want to do,
Yeah.
we can justify getting rid of it. We can justify using AI towards eliminating that out of our lives. I think that in general human beings tend toward a sort of predestination. We have this idea that there is this like foregone conclusion of the right ending almost. Like even how we view our own lives, we have these ideas of where we want to end up, and everything in between is just this transition that we're trying to get through to get there. And so I feel like you could take this language of efficiency and mundanity and boringness, and I like that question of like moralization, like what are we deeming moral? I don't know, I lost my train of thought. But I think that there is something like really there in terms of how we justify AI use versus condemn it.
Absolutely.
I want to sort of continue to think about this idea of efficiency, because I think that without getting sort of apocalyptic about it, there is a really significant history of that word, specifically in the context of people in power deciding which human lives are worth preserving versus taking, and it is like honestly kind of to go back to Marx, tied directly to who can produce the most, right?
Yeah.
And so that I think is another interesting current to add into this, which is not constrained within AI, but is I think definitely related, which is how are we being talked to about the purpose of our lives. And that, you know, we're in college, and I think it's a good opportunity to sort of reroute this in our experience as college students, which is what is the language that we're hearing about what a priority is.
Absolutely.
And I won't name names, but I saw a higher up in our university record a video recently in which like the slogan that she was sort of saying in front of the camera was "Be the CEO of your own life." And I saw that and I was like, oh,
Wow.
like allergic to that. Whatever that is, that's the 7th stage of capitalism or the 11th circle of hell. And so I think that there's also that side to the conversation of how does it fit in within the larger narrative of what we're here to do, if people have thoughts about that.
Can I add an inkling? Because
Add an inkling.
it's another Marxist inkling, I'm sorry.
Don't
but
apologize.
I think that fits really nicely with the process of alienation from labor and alienation from the product of our work that Marx talked about. I conveniently bring this up because I read a lot of Marx this semester. But I think going along with that, like AI is interesting because there's this notion that like it is the thing doing the work, or it is like causing us to be more removed from the product of our work. For example, like do I want to expose someone who I do research with? It's not you, it's someone else. There's just certain students I've seen who like use AI to do their work, for example, and then you ask them about it and they simply cannot explain what they did. But I think like this kind of, to go back to how AI is like talked about by the people who make it, they do tout it as this tool to make us more efficient and make us better workers, and it'll improve your work life, it'll make your life easier. But at the same time, it's like slowly displacing the work process and like it first in some cases like the creative process, where we end up becoming less connected to the end product of what we produce, or something else actually does the production for us.
It kind of reminded me of what Madison was saying earlier in terms of employability and the incorporation of AI into the ideal employee.
In college curriculums.
Yeah, and particularly the idea of the new ideal employee.
Yeah.
Of like who are universities hoping to produce? And what is the relationship of that person to AI?
And what is the point of college now? If
That's a terrifying and frankly despicable question.
people are talking about it though.
I know, and we should too, probably, but it's just so,
I know.
anyway.
Anyway.
Thinking about it in the university life, I really liked what you said, Caitlin, about moralization. And I also think it can be tied in kind of, I think a lot of the use of AI is also, the allure of it is to evade responsibility, and to evade anxiety, and to evade, making mistakes. They're not your mistakes. If it's, well, first of all, AI doesn't make mistakes. It's just like, when you're looking at a piece of AI writing, for example, it's usually grammatically correct. It's
Yeah.
like, it has its voice, that's very recognizable now. But there's no mistakes there. And there's no struggle. It's just all so smooth. And I think that's what worries me as well, is that we're going to be producing workers that cannot allow a mistake to be made. And we're going to produce a work environment that will not allow one single mistake to be made, because now that we have this supposedly perfect sort of machine or intelligence, you kind of have no excuse to make any mistakes anymore, when in reality that's the mark of someone who is doing work. Something is inevitably going to go wrong. And I think the thing with AI too is that when it does make a mistake, it's so insidious in the fact that it could be hallucinating things about a certain book when it writes an essay. And so it's not that well-meaning, I use comma splices everywhere, but I'm still talking about that book,
Yeah.
as opposed to just a beautifully formed nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really what is the most alarming to me about AI and forming what a student is and what a worker is. It's the idea that we're not gonna be able to make mistakes anymore. It's not gonna be acceptable to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. I mean, going off of that, I feel like I totally agree. I feel like the era of AI has not afforded mistakes to be made, basically. Because at the end of the day, let's say even though I wrote my essay full, and then now I'm getting, for instance, worried about if it's gonna be good or not, maybe something's wrong, but someone could actually just tell you, oh, then ask chat, put it in there, and then just check. But even that is still with an AI present, and it's this idea that, oh, even if I don't know something, even if I'm inexperienced in something, I have a backbone to lead on, and they will always tell you this thing, and if you don't acknowledge that, and if you don't use that, you're the dumb one. You're the one that's
That's interesting.
you know? You're the one that's not using it, and you're the one that's choosing not to use it, and also getting experiencing failure for it, and not a lot of leniency and also affording not a lot of leniency because of that, because there's an option that you have.
Yeah.
And it's also just the idea of, we kind of go back to mundanity and the micro interactions we have with people and connections. When we lose mundanity, when we lose that opportunity to make mistakes, for instance, you could easily draw something, right, instead of putting it into AI. Of course, it's going to be your first time drawing something immaculate, but that experience of you drawing could impact your life course, impact how you feel about life every single day on a daily basis. It's not just about what you're going to get, it's about the process of getting there and understanding the different branches that you might become. And I feel like we're getting out of touch with that.
That kind of reminds me of I find it very strange whenever I'm in class and they're we're gonna do a project using AI. I find that to be the most weird thing ever. It's so strange. Why am I in a science class using AI? This feels a bit unnecessary. But I think that's really interesting because you just compare I could draw something by hand. It's my thing was I'd rather have just drawn it by hand. It would have been bad, but I get the idea is supposed to be learn from it. But it's just but you're a teacher. I'm supposed to be learning from you. And so I guess they just want you to learn how it functions, but I'm yeah, I can Google that, I guess, or you can do research on that. You don't necessarily need to use it to figure that out. But I was doing a paper in a different class, and we had to draw these really intricate diagrams. And think about it, I could have used AI for that. But for some reason, because it was academic, obviously I was why would I do that? I'm just gonna make it by hand, and I did, and it was fine, and I actually enjoyed the process. But it's just interesting that for me, in academic spaces, I don't use AI unless it's the instructor saying use it, or saying oh no, you should use it, and just say at the bottom that you used it. which I think is just very interesting. And aside from like the PR project I did last semester, all the other times I've been asked to use it by a professor, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't add anything to what you're supposed to be teaching me. This is like a side thing that is cool to know, but like I think it would be better if they would like do some research about this and like let me know your thoughts rather than use it, see what it does, and like create some conclusion about how you feel about that. It's kind of like, I think you're supposed to be teaching me. I think that's how this kind of works, but I think that's like an interesting thing that what you said made me think of.
I think that the thought that I had while you were talking is that we have a right to do things badly. And that is something that we don't talk enough about. But that is something that I think is being changed potentially by this incorporation of AI, which is that especially like if you're in the arts or if you're not in the arts, if you're in any field really, you have the right to make shitty work. And like that's in fact incredibly an important process, an important part of creating good work. Because and so then I think we can look at it sort of more long term and think about how AI will shape our relationship to our own mistakes, to our own sort of internal processes, how we trust them and how we don't trust them, and also how we set boundaries with these sort of mechanisms that demand perfection from us. Like that to me seems incredibly dangerous, especially for people our age. Like it's not supposed to be, you know, you turn in a flawless essay that means nothing. It's supposed to be like you bit off too much, like more than you can chew, and you turn in something that's not fully formed or not fully thought, and then you learn from it, and you like, I don't know.
There's friction in the process.
And you have different resources. I mean, do people even go to the writing center anymore? Do people go to professor?
It's a great fucking question.
That's what I'm saying. Do people go to the professor actual like, you know, hours and like talk to them? Do people ask their peers and reach out to them? Which could all build different experiences. You could literally build a relationship with your peer.
Yeah.
You can build a relationship with your professor. You can actually learn about writing in a different way that is personalized to you.
Yeah.
Not just on this algorithm that's very general to a lot of people.
But have you considered that that's really hard and therefore people don't want to do it?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
You heard that it takes time and that we have to
Right.
pay those
Oh my
people
God.
and like.
I think it all really, I've had this conversation just over and over again about this, and specifically in regards to college and why people are using AI in college. And I think it all does come back to the idea of efficiency, and what Anna was saying earlier about you can't make mistakes, and what you're saying is you can't make mistakes. College has kind of shifted from this experience where you're attempting to grow as a person, which is what kind of ostensibly rich families were sending their rich sons to go and do at college, was to make them a more worldly person, whatever. But it's shifted into, and college, you can see this in how colleges market themselves. I mean, I do the tours for Fordham, and we market, like 89% of Fordham students will have an internship by the time they graduate. Colleges now are marketing that you go through it, you get this end result. And to kind of return to this idea of predestination and how people think about their lives, they very much, I feel that people think of their lives as check mark, like lists to check things off of. And anytime that you're not progressing straight forward, and it comes back to efficiency. Efficiency is always the driving force of this. Capitalism, blah, 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 blah. But anytime you're not progressing forward is wasted time.
Yeah.
And I think that that really is kind of what is pulling us, or a lot of college students, towards AI. Is, well, I'm spending all this money to be here. College has promised me this one thing, which is that I'm going to get out of it. Why would I waste my time struggling through this when I can just do it easy with AI and get what I was promised?
Yeah.
And get closer to that end goal and check it off my list.
Yeah.
There's, sorry.
Yeah.